Welcome to ShiftWatch. I'm your host, Starbuck. In this episode, there's been too much discussion lately around telepathy from many sources, and it seems as though it's the next topic I'm to address to the tribe. A few years ago, Judith Kusel crossed my path and resonated deeply through her book, Why I Was Born in Africa. This book provides a wonderful narrative to help put into perspective Earth's cosmic history. Here, she shares her experiences with telepathy and telepathic abilities that I'm sure you'll find fascinating. Next, Dr. Tamitha Skov covers the current solar storm conditions in a wonderfully illuminating way. Then, I'm in a position to start to bring clarity to these instances of what our government knew about ultra-terrestrials. This is information regarding Eisenhower's extraterrestrial meetings of 1954. You be the judge on what we knew and when. And finally, I feel like we needed to cover a bit more of Judith's perspective on telepathy before I dismissed your attention today. So here you go.
We are in the most intensified shift that ever happened. It is a shift into the greater dimensions. And as this shift happens, you've got to realize that everything in your life is shifting. And if you try to cling on to anything now, it's just impossible. This is a whole new life. It's a whole new beginning for all of us. And today I want to talk about telepathy because I'm often asked about it. Now, first of all, you cannot access, because of the fall of Atlantis and into the density that we fell in the 3D, the higher abilities were shut down. And it was mainly shut down because our upper chakras were shut down. In Atlantis, we had 12 chakras open, and then with the fall, we could only operate on 7. And this goes with the spine. We also forgot the power of a spine as a transmitter as well. So this all works together. I won't go into all of that because this is not what this video is all about. But I'm just saying that everything synchronizes and works as one. And I teach that in my courses, and I also work with it in my higher cosmic transmitters that I'm doing now, transmitting a lot, which I haven't done before in that scale. But also it is something that is a whole science in itself. And a science not like people think of science, but also the science of the soul. As we awaken more and more, and as I do my soul readings and I work with the higher realms more, I realize that we've forgotten that the soul is a total entity on its own. It's got the most amazing abilities that you can think of, and gifts and talents that is far greater than anything that we can conjure up as humankind. And it's good to remember that, because it also goes with the power of love. It is all wonderful to have your third eye open and all the abilities, but if your heart is closed, then it's a different dimension. It's a lower dimension. Then you cannot access the higher powers of the heart-soul connection, because the soul is directly attached to the heart. So if you want to ask me about telepathy, then the first thing I would ask you, is your heart center wide open? It is so important at the moment that we understand that. Yes, you can access telepathy through the mind, but it is a lower form of telepathy. It's in a lower frequency. Because the third eye, the throat and the heart, with your higher upper chakras and your spine, work as a transmitter channel. And that is the 33 octaves that are there in your spine as well of sound. So even though you think that telepathy is not working with the power of sound, it does work with the power of sound, because it all is one interconnected energy. Your soul is energy. You only take on a physical form during an incarnation on earth, or wherever you are incarnated in other galaxies or star systems or constellations. And it also depends on what dimensional frequency they operate in, because the higher you are evolved, the less dense a body you have. You have the totally light body, which our naked eyes cannot see, but our third eye can tune in. Now, with me, the third eye awakening came like a bang. That is when my whole life sort of like caved in. And my journeys are recorded in my books, which you can read. But to me, it was a high opening of everything. And I don't suggest that that happens to you, because it needs to be a tempered journey. But most of us now are so glued up on our electronic devices, which are jamming devices. So if you want to really develop your telepathy, the first thing is switch off those devices. They do jar your energy fields, whether you like it or not. Those electronic things do get into your energy fields, and that is why it's a very good thing to actually shield yourself from it. And there are actually means and ways of doing it, with crystals and also with certain symbols, which I won't go into here as well. But the first thing is that if you are in nature, then you will realize that all animals, trees and everything have got sensors. And those sensors are actually what is censoring you even as you come into their energy fields. The more sensitive you become to this, the more you will realize that everything is a living being. And all are actually have the telepathic abilities.
Space weather this week is calming down after that big solar storm that we had at the beginning of the month. As we take a look at our Earth-facing disk, region 4100 is still firing some big flares here and there, but they're a lot more infrequent. Meanwhile, what we've really been paying attention to are the big filaments. In fact, back on the 3rd, you can see a nice filament eruption from this channel right here. You can see it kind of taking off, and then you can see a nice little dimming in that region right there. That was actually an Earth-directed solar storm. You can actually even see a little bit of burning down in here, so it lets you know that there's something at high latitudes that have just lifted off all the way toward toward Earth. And if we take a look in coronagraphs, you can see the bulk of the structure is really going to the north. We've missed a few frames in the coronagraph, but you can kind of see a little bit of a halo here, and then this really wispy part. All this is the part that's actually headed toward Earth, but it is very slow, very wispy, and believe it or not, it's actually hitting Earth now. It's been hitting for the last few hours, and I bet you nobody really even noticed unless you're at high latitudes. So that's the way it's going to be, is likely going to be a very, very weak storm. Not going to be worrying about it so much, going to be more concerned about the fast solar wind that's going to be chasing that storm and hitting us here over the next couple days. That could potentially bring us more aurora down to mid-latitudes, but we'll talk more about that in a minute. Meanwhile, we've been also watching this little false start. You can see that little filament. It looks like it was going to be eruptive, but it didn't. It kind of fell back to Earth, or fell back to the sun. So that was because region 4106 kind of emerged onto the solar disk. So we're going to continue to watch this filament. Not sure if it's going to end up erupting, but it is moving through the Earth strike zone now, so we're keeping our eyes on it. Meanwhile, region 4105 is really now the only big flare player on the disk outside of region 4100, which we're saying goodbye to. So we're going to be paying attention to see whether or not we're going to get some big solar flares from it. Right now, it doesn't look like it's all that noisy, and so likely things are going to continue that way. Now, as we switch to our far-sighted sun, we're now taking a look at stereo A. We're back to using stereo A because stereo A is now finally far enough to the sun's west limb that it sees a little bit around the corner. As you can see, here's Earth, here's the sun, and here's stereo A looking at the sun, you know, from the west limb and beyond. And as you can see from stereo A's point of view, you can actually still see that massive coronal hole that gave us that really fast solar wind and gave us a decent storm before we had that big G3 plus storm. Well, that, believe it or not, when we had that other filament eruption, which you can see here, that actually caused a little bit of change in that coronal hole. So by the time this thing rotates back into Earth view, it's going to look a little bit different. It might have closed up a little bit, but we'll know that better once we see it again in about 10 to 12 days from now. Meanwhile, region 4100, 4101, and 4099 really haven't been showing much activity at all. So we're kind of wondering whether or not that's going to be the end of them, or if they're going to get new life on the sun's far side. But we're going to have to take a look at those other regions that we can't see that are more on the east limb. We'll take a look at those in just a minute.
(1953), U.S. President Harry Truman passed the reins of power to his successor, President Dwight D. Eisenhower. Truman also gave Eisenhower a pretty hefty file concerning a top-secret project called Majestic 12 that Truman established by classified executive order. Majestic 12, also known as Magic 12 and MJ-12 for short, is a code name for a secret committee of scientists, military leaders, and government officials formed in 1947 to facilitate the recovery and investigation of alien spacecraft. They were also founded to work together to understand and communicate with UFOs and extraterrestrials. Majestic 12 leaked secret government documents were first circulated by ufologists and made known to the public in 1984. Having received the Majestic 12 documents, President Eisenhower was extremely interested in UFOs and ETs. There is evidence that he met with ETs secretly, in fact, at least 3 times, once at Edwards Air Force Base in California and twice at Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico. Since the Eisenhower meetings, other instances of UFO landings at or near Holloman Air Force Base have been reported. But what evidence do we have of Eisenhower's meetings? And what did Eisenhower discuss with the aliens? Let's try and find out. President Eisenhower, a former 5-star Army general, always had a strong belief in life on other planets. And in February of 1944, he was spending several days in Palm Springs on a golfing vacation. However, he disappeared for several hours one Saturday afternoon and even missed a scheduled public dinner. He was not seen again until late the following morning. So where did he go? William Cooper, a member of the Naval Intelligence Briefing Team with access to classified documents, is considered a credible witness. His review of these documents revealed that extraterrestrials had made contact with Earth. The aliens warned Ike that the planet was on the path of self-destruction and expressed a desire to meet to help establish a lasting peace, which takes us to Ike's first encounter. The first meeting with the aliens and Eisenhower occurred at Edwards Air Force Base in February 1954. Navy Commander Charles L. Suggs reported that his father had attended the meeting between Ike and the ETs. Eisenhower met with 2 Nordic-appearing blue-eyed ETs. A third one stood near the door as a lookout. Nordic alien is the name given to the humanoid extraterrestrials purported to have come from the Pleiades star system or resemble Nordic Scandinavians. They are further described as being 6 to 7 feet tall, with long blonde hair and fair skin. The discussions between Ike and the Nordic aliens were polite. Eisenhower sought to negotiate a treaty with the aliens, but was unwilling to comply with their demand to cease nuclear weapon testing. As a result, the aliens departed without a treaty in place. However, they returned the following year to Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico for another meeting with Eisenhower. And there is a corroborating story to the ET meeting with Ike at Edwards Air Force Base. A man named Gerald Light wrote a letter in April 1954, claiming to have been an eyewitness to the Edwards Air Force Base meeting between Eisenhower and the ETs. Light provided details such as watching Air Force officials studying 5 aircraft with the permission of their alien owners. In February of 1955, approximately 300 people saw Air Force One land at Holloman Air Force Base and taxi back out to the end of the runway. Shortly after the plane landed, the pilot instructed the tower to turn off all radar while the president's plane was on the tarmac. Soon after Air Force One landed, the radar was turned off, and 3 round discs were seen in the sky. One landed about 200 feet in front of Air Force One. Another hovered over the area as though keeping watch, and the third one disappeared from visibility. Eisenhower descended from the steps of Air Force One and was seen shaking hands with a being at the door of the saucer, and then entered the unusual saucer-shaped aircraft. Ike was in the saucer for about 45 minutes. In 2012, Timothy Good, a respected author and former Pentagon consultant, publicly discussed Eisenhower's meeting with the extraterrestrials. Good elaborated on the purpose of these encounters, noting that these extraterrestrials, like many others, seemed to sought peace. They aimed to negotiate a positive resolution for Earth's problems, emphasizing the need for the U.S. to cease nuclear weapons testing. Initially, they wanted the public to be informed of their existence. However, in the final treaty, they appear to have changed their stance, opting to remain secret. Ultimately, Eisenhower signed a treaty with an alien race called the Greys. The terms of the treaty are reported to have been as follows: we would not be involved in their affairs, and they would not become involved in ours. They would help us with the developing of our technology. They would not make a treaty with any other nations on Earth. They could abduct humans for various experiments, but had to provide names of all those they abducted to the Majestic 12 Committee and return them unharmed. The public would not be informed about the existence of the Greys. In 1964, 3 UFOs flew into the airspace at Holloman Air Force Base. They were tracked on radar and actually captured on film. One seemed to wobble and eventually landed at the Air Force Base. 3 humanoids with blue-gray complexions, dressed in tight-fitting flight suits, were met by the Air Force Base commander and 4 other officers. The aliens stayed for several days as their aircraft was purportedly repaired. In December of 2023, Congress passed legislation that directs the government to eventually tell the public at least some of what it knows about UFOs, but stops short of more aggressive steps. Lawmakers sought to force greater transparency around UFOs and extraterrestrial activity. The measure, which was tucked into the annual defense policy bill that won the final approval with bipartisan vote, directs the National Archives to collect government documents about unidentified anomalous phenomena, technologies of unknown origin, and non-human intelligence. Lawmakers in both chambers have ratcheted up efforts to increase government transparency surrounding UFOs and extraterrestrial matters as conspiracy theories proliferate and suspicions persist that the government is concealing information from the public. Congress has reason to believe that the executive branch has concealed information about UFOs that should be made public. The Pentagon has begun stepping up the number of explanations it provides for recent videos showing unidentified phenomena, suggesting that the pressure from Congress for greater transparency has had some early results.
You can communicate with trees, you can communicate with plants, you can communicate with rocks, you can communicate with any living being on this planet. And also you must remember that rocks record energy and they record history. People are not aware that rocks are living beings, but they are. And not only that, but the earth is a living being. And you can communicate with the earth, you can communicate with the intergalactics, you can communicate with any link. The intergalactics do not use language. It's primitive. It was given to us when the earth fell into the 3rd dimension. And when our telepathic and third eye abilities shut down. I have found that animals are immensely psychic, immensely able to read your energy fields and to communicate telepathically with you. But first they read your heart center. They can read you like no human beings done. And it's an ability that humankind has always had. I remember my father telling me that the old Zulus, now the Zulus, they still have it today, but not all of them have it, because they also lost their touch with nature. But he said that the ancient Zulus could actually read you like a book, and they would always give you a name that fitted your soul perfectly. So that means that in a lot of ways, we have lost that ability. But the closer to nature you actually are, the more your telepathic abilities come naturally. Because you are naturally part of the earth, your embodiment is, and you have a body elemental that actually helps you to keep your body healthy, and we can call on that elemental anytime. And it's the same like fairies and gnomes, they all are living beings. Like the mer people in the oceans, we just lost the ability to see them and the ability to move into that being in a greater extent. I have found that when your heart center is open, it's absolutely a beautiful white with a touch of pink and a touch of gold. And the animals, if you can and work directly with the heart center of the animals, a two-way communication opens in the highest degree. And this is the beauty of all that is happening now, in whatever form or way that is happening. It brings in an instant deep respect between the souls concerned. Because as I said, the animals read you, and you read the animals then through their heart center, through the energy that they emit. I have found that when I then transfer my thoughts, they will immediately pick it through the heart center and then communicate back. That doesn't mean that they don't use their psychic abilities, which animals have in an immense sense, but it also means that they trust you with the information that they transmit. And you transmit it back to them. Because you are energy and they are energy. And it's a matter of exchange of energy. And there you've got to trust whatever information you intuitively and through your mind actually pick up. Some people will get the information in pictures. Some will get it in hearing. It's like in a voice in your head. Or some of you will just know that message. And the same is when you transfer the message, when you communicate back, you put it in energy form where your heart and soul talks to the animal soul. Because the souls of animals have souls just like you do. It is a natural ability. And the more that you move into silence and stillness in nature and really listen with your heart and your soul and all of your being, the more the abilities naturally unfold, because they are now opening up as we go into the 5th, 6th, and 7th dimensional state. It is a gift that's given to us. Just like we can communicate with the intergalactics now, and they communicate with us.